Hey all you cool cats and kittens, welcome to my YouTube channel for Molly Wally Woodworking. This video is focused on how I made this awesome shop stool that will most likely end up in my classroom. It isn't my design, I'm going off the video made by Laura Kaumpf, an amazingly talented maker. The first step, as is with most woodworking projects, is to mill all the lumber to its final dimensions. I was really excited for this step as it was the first project I got to use my new 8-inch helical jointer on. I started there by jointing one face and then the adjacent edge to get a perfect 90 degrees. This is a huge upgrade for my shop. Coming from a 6-inch jointer, this has made a world of difference. It's so much quieter and easier to use. The next thing I needed to do was to head to the planer and bring it all down to the final thickness. For the stool top, I finished at about 1.25 inches, and then for the legs, I was down around 3/4 of an inch. Once that was done, I moved to the table saw and ripped my boards to the final width. The seat ended up being a circle with a 13.5-inch diameter, so I ripped the longer board to 7 inches. Off camera, I cut it to length at the miter saw, also 14 inches. The legs I cut to 4.5 inches, and that eventually will be brought down to fit the middle where they connect to the base. After the boards were ripped to the right width, I could glue the pieces together. I took out probably my most loved tool in the shop, my Festool Domino, to help with alignment since the seat blank would be too wide for my planer after it was glued together. This is definitely a luxury tool, I know that, but the same result could be achieved with a dowel jig or a biscuit joiner. That being said, I wouldn't trade this tool for any of those. I think I use it on every single project. Next, I went down into the basement, as up here in Alberta, it's basically still winter, so I have to do all of my glue ups inside. I glued the two pieces for the seat together, using one of my daughter's old t-shirts to clean up the squeeze out. While the glue was drying, I could switch my attention to the scaffolding jack that needed some modifications to work. First, I had to do a little grinding on the threads to release the bolt. The threads were stamped. I'm assuming it's a safety device for when it's being used for its intended purpose. Then, I took out the angle grinder with a cutoff wheel and started to cut off the pegs from the bolt. After they were gone, I switched to a flap disc to smooth it all out. I skipped a couple of steps here, but the basic idea is that the bolt is epoxied into one piece of walnut, and then on either side of that, 2 more pieces of walnut with a hole just big enough for the screw to fit through are glued on. This essentially secures the bolt so it has nowhere to go. I squared up all the sides once the glue is dry and checked to see if it worked. Now all of the router work needed to happen. Some flush trimming from templates, dovetail cutting, and rounding over edges. First up was using an MDF circle template to cut out the shape of the seat. I cut off a bunch of the edges on the miter saw first to make the routing a little bit more safe. Next, I switched bits to the dovetail bit and found the center of the block. One pass on all 4 sides and my dovetails were set. I took this nice and slow as I was a little bit worried about tear out. Then I started on the legs. They were splayed out at an angle, which made routing a little bit awkward, but I got it done. On camera, it looks like I just breezed through this, but I had made a bunch of trial pieces to get the fit just right. Now that the dovetails were cut, I could focus on the shape of the legs themselves. Again, I used some plywood to make a replica of the walnut I had just cut, and then drew on some lines until I got a shape that I liked. I must have gone through 3 or 4 different renditions to get the one that I really wanted. Then I took the plywood and headed to the oscillating sander to sand to those lines that I had just made. A bandsaw would have come in real handy here, but work with what you got. After the template was done, off camera, I attached it to the walnut using double-sided tape and did some more template routing with a flush trim bit. Now, all the pieces were ready to be rounded over and dry fit to make sure that everything fit nice and snug. When I was happy with the fit, I then switched to my palm router and a 1/8 inch round over bit for all of the edges of the legs and the seat. This is basically just to break any sharp edges and add a little softness to the design. Once I knew everything fit, I sanded all of the different pieces down to 180 grit and added my Molly Wally woodworking brand that I got from Wolverine Custom Woodworks. Chris is another Alberta guy and does fantastic work. He ships worldwide, so definitely go check him out. Finally, I could apply the finish. For this, I use circa 1850 Danish oil. It's easy to apply and looks great. Next, I could assemble all of the different pieces. Then, the moment of truth came, where I actually had to sit on the stool. There were a few people following along on Instagram that were skeptical that it could hold me. I had my wife videotape the moment, as I knew that if it broke and I fell, she would be there to support me. After she finished laughing. Thankfully, it didn't come to that, and it seems like it is plenty strong. I'm so happy with the way that this turned out. It really was a fun build where I got to try out some new skills. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed.